Hey guys, what is up? Liru the Lance Corporal here, and this is going to serve as the official debrief from the Zeus' side for the Bornholm incident. Now, I know a lot of people have been asking me a few questions, such as the background for why the campaign even came about in the first place, the other 7 endings that could have happened within this scenario, and what was it, a sequel to this campaign, since I've opened the door for SCP-based ops. How can we move forward from there? And I'm going to get to all of these questions within this video. So, in terms of the background for the campaign, it was originally meant to be a one-time thing, as in we did the first episode and then we moved on to I believe we were going to do some Kudos Afghanistan stuff or possibly move to XCAM Tanis, but after Jester released his POV and noticed how popular it got, he asked me to extend it to as basically as much as we could go. So a lot of the campaign was actually week upon week of improv. 90% of the campaign itself, I want to say, is improv. And that's also contributed based on the fact that a lot of times the mission file would not work, and I figured it out on the last day and was kicking myself for it because I was using a slightly outdated mod set that the 506 was using, and that included a sniper rifle that I would give to little Sergeant Fluffers right here, and it was from an asset that was taken out of the mod set itself, so when we tried to have the server load it, it wouldn't load it, and thus we get a mission file with no slot. So I ended up having to basically delete everything because I didn't know what the issue was, and then build it all in the Zeus interface. And this took hours upon hours of work and headbanging, but we still made it all work. So overall, campaign was really fun, really stressful, and I can't wait to do something like it again. But let's get to the other 7 endings that I've been boasting about. And to help me with this, I have some Eden Editor stuff I've made up to kind of show off the endings themselves. So without further ado, let's get to ending 1. Ending 1 would have played off of something like this. The scientist would convince the 506 that there were some AA positions to the north that would hinder any sort of landing efforts by US forces. So the 506 would have gone up there and cleared them out and then called for extract. However, this would have been a farce. There would be no AA, it would just be a very large fortified base that the Broken God had. And this is so that the scientists could then tie up the loose end of them ever being there. When I say them, I mean the Broken God, and thus, he'd get his way. 506 would get a chopper to come in. They may or may not figure out that there was no AA there, and they'd be none the wiser. Then the, US chopper would have come in, picked everybody up that would have left under heavy fire, and I would have made everything invincible so no one would get shot out. And then the overall debriefing addendum would be the scientist talking about his adventures with the 506, that he's going to be detained by the US, but he would ominously say that he would get out and continue his work. Ending 2 would have been the exact opposite of Ending 1. We've had in the past a few 506 operations actually fail outright, and I assume that that was a big possibility for this operation because this would have been, as said earlier, the toughest AO that the 506 would have faced in this entire campaign. So, what if they failed? What would happen in this instance? They would have gotten pretty much surrounded and swarmed by their enemy, slowly whittled down on medical supplies until they pretty much ran out, and thus they would have all been taken down. In the middle of the firefight, the scientist would have found a way to get away from the 506 to save his own life. He would have his own arrangements to get off the island just in case something like this would have happened. But this would have been that dark side of the campaign ending. Because I don't like it when the player base always knows they're going to win. I like to throw a curveball here and there. But the addendum would have pretty much been a sad and dismayed one from the scientist stating his adventures and his regrettable loss of the 506 for a potential future operation. and that he will look elsewhere to complete his work. Ending number 3 is actually very similar to the ending we got, which was ending number 6, in the sense of what if the chopper for ending number 1 got shot down before it was able to pick up the 506 and before I made it invincible to trigger ending number 1. They would have had to find an Mi-8 with low fuel within the Broken Gods compound. They would have had to flown it to this island under discretion of the scientists, and they would have then had to call the relay station. The scientists would handle that while the 506 defended, and swarms of zombies would be upon them as U.S. High Command would bring the chopper in. This was gonna be triggered if, again, I said if the chopper got shot down, or if we just needed to extend the finale in one form or another. Like if they finished the operation in 45 minutes and I wanted this to be close to a 2-hour gig. But the addendum for this mission would have been pretty similar to the first one. It would have included a note about how this ending happened, but it would have talked about how the scientist was being detained, but ominously he would be able to get out and continue his work. Now, the fourth ending was a bit far-fetched, but I thought of, a contingency in case the second extraction chopper from the third ending got shot down. And what this would basically be was the scientists would just start cussing and screaming, then state that there was a boat on the other island that's connected by a bridge, and the 506 would have to escort the scientists to this boat, and they would all get on, see that's full of fuel. The scientist would state that he has friends that can help them out, but they need to go towards them, and I would have had a submarine come up and extract them. However, the boat would have had limited slots. This is where things get really, really ugly, as to some people would have had to be left behind. And this, again, it wasn't the one I wanted to do unless I absolutely had to, but again, adding to that horror element of, not everyone can make it out for this one. So some people would have had a last stand while the scientists took the rest of the guys, and the addendum would have basically become a recruiting one with an ominous tone. Now, the reason none of these 4 endings made the cut was this. Probably my biggest mistake within the campaign is the fucking radio tower they're supposed to use to call in US forces to assist them. So, because I did this in Eden Editor and I made it invincible there, I forgot to then, when that mission file broke and I had to remake everything in Zeus, to make that radio tower invincible. So what ended up happening was this. That radio tower, essential to those 4 endings to extend the communications to U.S. ground forces and ground command, was destroyed. So I had to come up with 4 new freaking endings. Furthermore, on Operation 10, they killed a fuck ton of guys and destroyed a fuck ton of assets. So I thought having the Broken God forces be able to do stuff would probably be incorrect, because they would have been absolutely fucked over. So with the tower destroyed and, in my opinion, the Broken Hand being utterly fucked over, I had to create 4 new endings. And this is ending number 5. Basically, the goody two-shoe, everyone lives, everyone gets recruited by the scientist, and they get extracted by the Mobile Task Force group, and they're put in the chopper and put under the payroll of the SCP Foundation. This would have been a nice ending. It would have been a bit, actually a much tougher Insurgent AO to the north. Again, one of the loose ends the scientists would be tying up, but I didn't end up wanting to do this one because there was a severe degree of mistrust between the scientists and the 506. So then to stretch it out and say the scientists would then try to recruit them, in my immersive opinion, would have been a bit too much. Also, it would have made for a bit of an easier operation for the 506, and I still wanted it to be a bit of a challenge. So, I then came up with ending number 6. Ending number 6 is what we eventually got, where they would have been betrayed by the scientist, he would have been extracted, Fluffers would save him, provide information on what they need to do, and it would be an apology from the scientist from the bottom of his little black heart, and he would guide them on how to be extracted by U.S. forces. There'd be no ploys, no gimmicks, it would just be the 506 being extracted. And I think this one played out very, very well for what we needed to happen. Because, the U.S. forces get their guys back, the scientist got everything that he wanted, and thus, we had a pretty balanced ending, with the addendum being the scientist talking about the incident, his adventures with the 506th, and the possibility of a recruitment later down the line. I think this was definitely the most satisfying choice, other than ending number 7, which we'll talk about in a second, which would have just added a bit of time in case we were still below the hour and a half mark for the finale. Ending number 7 would have been a way to extend ending number 6, whereas for unknown reasons, probably a mechanical malfunction, I would have cut the fuel on the vehicle after making it invincible. It would have crash landed on the mainland again. However, with the radio equipment on the chopper, they would have immediately been able to call for an additional chopper and some backup to extract any of the surviving pilots and the rest of the 506 guys. They would have thought it's all over, then I would have taken control of one of the pilots and started yelling about a mechanical failure. We would have plowed into the island. Everyone would have survived the crash, and if it did for some reason blow up, I would have healed everyone, and we would have had this amazing last stand with zombies. And the addendum would have covered this, as well as the scientists making, a mention of their resilience, and then still state that there would be future recruitment available to this group. And this would have, again, just been a way to extend things, have a little last finale, Black Hawk Down sort of event. But we already went past 2 hours, so I decided not to go on this route. And then quickly, ending number 8 would have been pretty much cut and paste ending number 2. Same addendum, same remarks. Scientists would have either ducked out or not been a part of this ending, and thus, the what if you lose the campaign outright, and it would be sad, but it would be unexpected for the campaign. It would have made still a very climactic finish to the campaign as a whole.
So,
Now, the biggest question on everyone's mind, and definitely the one I've been asked the most, is Liru, is there going to be a sequel to the Bornholm incident? And I want to say yes, but in two parts. The first, which you're seeing a snippet of right now, is basically a gateway into SCP-based ops, Special Containment Protocol. For those of you who don't know what SCP is, it's basically just a bunch of horror fan fiction about containing anomalous instances throughout the world, and this faction does that here and there. This SCP being 432, basically that closet where we have in the middle is it's like a gateway to Narnia, only Narnia is a maze and everything in the maze wants to kill you. So we'll be doing an operation within that. But the difficult thing about SCP-based ops is they take a while to set up, if they're even possible to do based on every specific SCP out there. And after weeding through a few hundred on all the suggestions that were sent at me, it's clear that a lot of them aren't going to be doable, and the ones that are going to take dozens of hours to do. For example, the 432 one I want to do, I have scheduled to do in 2 to 3 weeks. I haven't opened sign up yet because it's not ready. It's taken me about 15 hours already to find a place to do it, add some finishing touches to the area. Thankfully, I found a place built within a map where this would be doable. Add in all the smaller details, and basically playtest it with some mods I find to make sure that there's an even experience, and then write out what the hell we'll even be doing anyway. And I estimate there's still a good 3 to 4 hours of work, because I still have to deploy it on the server, deploy the mods on the server, play test the hell out of it, have a few people come on and test the mod set, make sure nothing breaks, so that it's absolutely runnable, because I don't want to have a recreate of that mech zombie thing that we did forever ago that ended up breaking on us the day of because of one little issue that was unfixable. But of course, what about a direct sequel to something like the Bornholm incident? How can we go one step above from zombies in SCP-008, which is the zombie equivalent to what happened within the incident? And this was actually a bit of a no-brainer for me, based on some of the mods I've worked with previously. There's a very specific SCP called SCP-610, or as a lot of people call it, the Flesh That Hates. And it's basically Zombies 2.0, as I'd like to call it. And I guess you could more equate it to something like the Flood from Halo, where it can infect pretty much any living being and do with it what they want. So, overall, I have made something. It's in the works. It's a very basic idea right now, taking only a few assets from sources that I know will work, such as the Stalker mod for Arma 3. But in terms of player bases that could do something like this, that's the real difficult point, because this isn't something that the 506 would probably be in the mood for. When I say 506, I really mean Jester, because he's the one that runs the show for them. But the main question now is player base. Who would have the audacity, I want to say, to try to do something like this? Because this would be a very difficult campaign. If you aren't wearing the right gear, you're probably gonna get infected and then die within, the next few hours, depending on the temperature. And I would keep this operation as, lore based as I can with SCP-610. Of course, there would be some other anomalies that would happen because we're using stalker assets, but I think everything would still be workable. I have a 7 mission thing let out, going from just sending a few guys in to assess the situation all the way to a full on mobile task force assault of a very specific position. And thankfully, there's things that we can utilize within the mod set to, make this sort of issue. There's also a few things that we can use in here to, make other SCP ops as I described previously. But anyway, guys, that's it. Bornholm campaign in a nutshell. Great stuff. Would love to work with it again. Always fun to work with the 506. Always fun to work with other player bases. But thank you guys so much for listening. Go operate operationally. And otherwise, take care.